I say this every single month, but I cannot believe that the previous month is already behind us and it is July now. That is crazy. We are already halfway through 2026. Thankfully, I am also over halfway through my reading goal for this year. My goal was to hit 52 books, and I'm currently sitting at 39, which is very impressive considering I started school and I was not sure how much time I was going to be able to dedicate to reading, especially in the month of June, because the workload kept getting heavier and heavier for the course that I'm in, and I did not have a lot of free time to read. Thankfully, I did have a reading week in there, so I got to do a 24-hour readathon, which kind of bumped up what I read this month by a few books, bringing the total number of books I read in the month of June to 5, which is not too bad. So first off, I finished off a thriller reading vlog that I was filming with Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. Me and Riley Sager, we've got a love-hate relationship going on. I haven't minded the 2 books by him that I've read, but they definitely have not been my favorite thrillers. And I don't know, there's just something about his writing style that I don't want to say bores me at times, but it kind of does, and that sounds very harsh. I'm trying not to mean it in a harsh way. There's still decent plots to be found in these novels, but the twists just aren't twisty enough, in my opinion, to be called like a tense thriller. All in all, though, I did end up rating this book 4 stars. It was going to be a 3-star to me, but I did really enjoy the ending. I thought that it really picked up towards the last 100 pages. It was leading up to that I found it got to be a little bit of a snooze fest at times, and it also just was not what I was expecting. I thought there was going to be a little bit more just suspenseful moments for the main character, and I found that a lot of opportunities were missed in that department. But still, overall, a 4-star read. Not a bad read per se, but probably not one that I'd ever want to pick up again, and Riley Sager's on thin ice for me because I'm not getting all of the hype that everybody seems to get from his books, unfortunately. Next, I read a book that I borrowed from someone that came highly recommended, and it deserves all the praise it gets and more. It should definitely have more hype surrounding it, and that is Jungle by Yossi Ginsberg. This is a memoir about his survival in the Amazon jungle, alone for part of his survival too, by the way, which was absolutely fascinating, and he wrote it so well, but nightmare-inducing for sure. Definitely not something I would ever want to experience, but he experienced it, lived to tell the tale, and then decided to devote his life afterwards to preserving the jungle and encouraging different people to not take nature for granted and not take the wilderness for granted and really appreciate what Mother Nature has to offer us. A man after my own heart, I must say, because I love anybody who can survive a situation like that and then also just be so appreciative of the world around us. If you like survival stories or anything like set in the wilderness, or you were ever into Survivor Man with Les Stroud, I know that's kind of a Canadian thing, but anything like that, I highly, highly recommend this book. I have not yet watched the movie because I'm now borrowing this for a little bit longer from someone, so my partner can now read it too before we watch the movie together. This book is that good that I'm like insisting he reads this book because he needs to experience this book too. Next, to start off my 24-hour readathon, I finally picked up I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. I was nervous going into this book that it was going to be somewhat like The Unworthy by Augustina Bastarrica. So nervous, but thankfully I can honestly say it is nothing like that book, and I think it's unfair to compare the two because though they revolved around women trying to survive in kind of a post-apocalyptic world, other than that, there's really not a lot of similarities between them. The Unworthy is more about a cult that is filled with women, and they're trying to do different things to move up the ranks of this cult and then also survive, whereas this one is about a group of women who were imprisoned and kept captive underground in a cage until one day they end up getting free. I won't say how because I'm not going to spoil this for anyone. I think it's a great book to go into not knowing much about. But anyway, they get free and then they have to survive in this post-apocalyptic world, and there are no men, no other people except for themselves, and they have to learn how to live like that, which is a very interesting concept. This book was definitely ahead of its time, and I'm so glad that I finally built up the courage to read it because it was absolutely a 5-star read. It actually almost made me cry a few times, and then also just feel very grateful for the society that we have, even though it is arguably very messed up sometimes. It beats being alone, I think, most days. One recommendation I would have if you are going to read this book and you have this edition, I'm not sure if there are any other editions that would also have introductions, but I would be weary of reading the introduction before the actual story itself, because I did that, and unfortunately the introduction spoiled some pieces of the book that I wish it hadn't. It talked as though the reader should have already known this stuff, but I can definitely tell, had I not read the introduction and just gone with the story first, some of the things that the introduction touched on would have been shocking to me, and I am really disappointed that it kind of spoiled those parts for me. So I would recommend skipping the introduction and maybe reading it after the book if you are interested in learning a little bit more about the book but don't want to be spoiled ahead of time. Then after that heavy book in my readathon, I decided to go with something that I thought was going to be, I'm going to say, less meaningful, for lack of a better word. If I judged this book by its cover, and I did, I will admit it, and I am ashamed to say it, I definitely judged this book by its cover. I thought there was not going to be a lot of substance to it, and I also thought the plot was going to be lacking and it was just going to be some brain rot. I was going to get through it in a couple hours and call it a day. I was so wrong. This is why they say don't judge books by their cover. This is a dark romance about a woman who ends up being a pen pal with a man in prison, and then one day he shows up at her door and things escalate from there. That's all I'm going to say. If you are not into dark romance, don't click away from this video just yet because you think, oh, dark romance, I cannot, I'm leaving. Trust me when I say it's not the romance of this book that is dark. The romance is actually quite beautiful and romantic and got me a bit teary and also giggly at times. And I will say the spice is pretty well written. Compared to other things I've read, it's top tier spice. But the dark part about this book, once again, is not the romance, it's the plot outside of the romance. I don't want to get too much into it because I think it's definitely one, again, where it would be a lot better just to not know what's going to happen going into it and let yourself just be fully immersed in the story and ride the waves all the way till the end. You have to get to the end for this book to pack the punch that it is meant to pack. Trust me on that. But the romance is not full of red flags and disturbing, and I'm not scratching my head going like, how is this romantic? It's the way a dark romance should be written, in that maybe there are some aspects of these characters that are a bit morally gray, but that is not what makes this dark. It's more like a romantic thriller, I think. Anyway, highly recommend. If you like romance, not even dark romance, if you like romance and thrillers, I would say you should give this one a go. And before you think I'm the only person who has this opinion and maybe I have really poor taste in books, go ahead and look up the ratings and reviews on Goodreads or Fable, and it has a 4.1 star average. And that is insanely good for a romance book with this sort of a cover. So I'm not the only one who thought this book was amazingly written and very deep and moving and worthy of a 5-star rating. And then the last book that I read in the month of June, and arguably one of the most disgusting books I've ever read in my lifetime, and I have read Tender is the Flesh, was The Lamb by Lucy Rose. This book is also about cannibalism, just like Tender is the Flesh, but somehow is more disturbing than that. And I don't say that lightly, because Tender is the Flesh gave me a very physical reaction where I felt sick afterwards and I did not want that book in my house anymore. I feel more strongly about this one. I was actually gagging trying to explain it to my partner after I had finished it. It was gross. But essentially, it is about a girl, a child, who lives in a cabin in the middle of the woods with her mother, and they wait for lost people, or strays they call them, to wander through the forest and either get lost and need directions, or get hurt and need help and wander to their door, and then they make meals out of these people. But what is very disturbing about this book is not only the graphic depictions of cannibalism and the little girl kind of thinking that this stuff is okay and normal, but it's also the child abuse that is depicted in this. Absolutely gut-wrenching. It is so gross to read some of the things that this poor little girl goes through, but also just seeing it from her eyes. It's told from her perspective and nothing is left to the imagination, but it is done so in a way that you're seeing it from the innocent perspective of a child. I don't know how to describe it, but it just made it 10 times more disturbing. Now, this book also had a crazy ending, and it was both satisfying and not satisfying all at the same time. I felt like bawling my eyes out and then also puking after finishing this book, but I still went ahead and only gave it a 4-star rating, not a 5-star, just because I think about halfway through the book, I felt like it was kind of getting a bit repetitive and also just slow. I think probably 50 or so pages could have been cut out of this book and it still would have packed the same same punch. Now I could also just feel that way because I really wanted this book to be over. It made me so freaking uncomfortable and everything just felt heavy and wrong after reading it. Probably not one I'd ever want to read again either. And I also don't know how much longer I want it in my house, which is sad because it is a signed edition. And it's not that it wasn't well written, it's just that the content is a little bit too heavy for me to actually want to cherish this book and keep it on my bookshelf and go back to it eventually. I think it might kind of be a one and done for me. Also, not a book that I'd recommend to many people unless you have a very strong stomach and you like body horror, I guess. Even then, I don't mind some body horror, but this was to the extreme. Definitely would check the content warning for it though, because like I said, there is child abuse, also animal abuse, cannibalism, and loads of other very disturbing aspects of this book that a lot of people would definitely not enjoy reading about. But that is all that I read in the month of June. A pretty decent month of reading, if you'd ask me. And I can't wait to see what July holds. I do not have a week off in July, which kind of sucks, but August is coming, and I think I have 2 weeks off in August. So hopefully I can read quite a bit then, because I have the itch to read right now. I just don't have the time to do it. But with that, I hope you have a great rest of your week and happy reading.